Is Zoro the deck to beat in the OP02 meta? Let's talk about it. What's up, captains? Welcome back to the other decks. My name's Casual Dubbo, and today we're going to be working on a Zoro deck profile for OP02 Paramount War. We're going to be going over the leader, the core of the deck, the essentials you need to add around it, as well as some flex cards that you can throw in just to add a little bit of variety to your deck building. Now, for those of you who don't know, in OP02, Zoro, much like in OP01, is an aggro swarm-like deck that's designed to kind of flood the board with characters to the point where you can then overwhelm your opponent with cheap but strong one-cost characters. And if you remember from OP01, Zoro was a very popular deck in the early parts of the format, but kind of fell off. So why is it coming back in OP02? Well, it now has two searchers available for a deck, including a searcher who can then search for another searcher. Also, there are characters that can boost one-cost character powers, which is pretty awesome. And to be honest, red in general gets a fantastic sort of KO effect, cheap KO effect in the form of Vista. But now that we've talked about sort of the summary of what the deck is looking to do, let's actually talk about the components. But before we do, just wanted to mention, if you are looking to buy some singles, to kind of supplement some of the pulls that you got from your OP02 boxes, and already use TCG Player and want to find a new way to help support this channel, using my affiliate link is a great way to do that. So I am affiliated with tcgplayer.com, which is pretty awesome. It's not a discount code, but if you use the link and make a purchase, a portion of whatever you bought from there will actually come back to me, and that money is then going to be used for additional prize support for the channel in case we do more tournaments or more equipment investments. So if you end up using my TCG Player affiliate link, thank you so much for your support of the channel. Really appreciate it. Alright, but with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into this deck profile. Alright, so starting us off with the leader, let's talk about leader Zoro. And if you played any amount of OP01, you kind of know what he does already, but he is a mono red 5,000 power leader, so 5 life, and then has the ability Dawn times 1 on your turn, all your characters gain plus 1,000 power. And so this is why cheap characters in general are really good with Zoro, because he's able to give them extra power inherently with his leader ability. And while some one costs are pretty low in power, if you're able to combine his sort of Anthem aura ability combined with some additional Dawn attachments, you're able to get them up to 5,000 power or beyond. And it's really those surprise hits that kind of make the Zoro deck so intimidating, because as an opponent, if you're playing against it, you have to kind of decide what's worth using my removal for. Like, yeah, some of my characters, if I put them on the board and don't attack with them, they can get removed, but is that just baiting out removal so that I can swarm the board even more? Kind of the balancing game that you play with Zoro. And with the number of one-cost characters we use in here, you can swarm the board pretty much whenever you want. It's kind of crazy. But I've kind of danced around the topic already, so let's go ahead and just jump right into the core. And so the core of this deck really revolves around Curly Dedan. So Curly Dedan is a new card from OP02, 2 cost to play, 3,000 power, counter plus 1k, so kind of the holy trifecta of stats that we like to see in a card. But the on play is pretty good. On play, look at 5 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 red character that costs 1 or less, and add it to your hand, then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. So this is a 1-cost searcher. And so when I said the whole thing about, a searcher that looks for another searcher, this Curly Dedan can find your Nami. Speaking of which, Nami is the other part of this, just because we love searchers, and the more searchers honestly you have in your deck, kind of the more consistent it can function. So this one's from OP01, 1 cost to play, 2,000 power, counter plus 1k, but on play, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 Straw Hat Crew type card other than Nami, and then add to your hand. Then place the remaining at the bottom of your deck in any order. And so essentially you've searched for a searcher who now can look for Straw Hat type crew members, and the one that you're probably going to be looking for most often is going to be Sunny-kun. So Sunny-kun is actually part of the promo pack that came with the Uta leader card, and it's pretty solid. So it is very much like Karu from the starter deck, 1 cost to play, 3,000 power, counter plus 1k. The most important part of Sunny-kun is that he is a film/straw hat crew type. And if you can find Sunny-kun in the early parts of the game, that is almost like a free 5k attack if you put, one Dawn onto him and then use Zoro's leader ability. And for anyone who experienced the duck meta, Karu meta, and did that with Zoro in OP01, y'all are legends. Shout out to Moonman TCG for really championing that. Also, shout out to them in general. Got to meet them at Treasure Cup. Really awesome people behind that channel, as well as shout out to Just A Gaming. But back to the deck profile. So in the core, we cover Curly Dedan, Nami, and Sunny-kun. There's actually 2 more people who I would put into this core. The first one would be Makino. So Makino is a 1 cost to play, 0 cost character, but counter plus 2k, so very awesome. Very similar stats to Otama from OP01, but it has a fantastic ability. Activate main, you can rest this character up to 1 of your red characters with a cost of 1, gains plus 3000 power during this turn. So once again, this is just a great buff in order to, strengthen one of your 1 costs, that Sunny-kun that you have available to attack. You can bump him up from naturally a 3k power to a 6k power just with Makino alone. And the fact that you can play it and then activate it, and the only sacrifice is really just resting it, is pretty dang good. Just be prepared to lose Makino on the sort of a return volley, if you will, because she is suspended or tapped or rested, so many different card games. But she's rested and thus able to be attacked into. Lastly, for the core, gotta talk about Vista. So Vista's a new card from OP02, 3 costs to play, 3000 power, counter plus 1k, but on play, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 3000 power or less, which covers a huge range of characters already. And then if you combine that with power reduction abilities such as Otama or Gordon, which we'll talk about later, Vista is a big problem for a lot of cards. Alright, now going into the essentials. First off, we're going to talk about Otama. You know her, you love her. If you played in OP01, Otama is a 1 cost to play, 0 power character, counter plus 2k. So awesome stat line, honestly, if you're looking for a counter, but awesome on play ability. On play, give one of your opponent's characters minus 2000 power during this turn. If you combine Otama with Vista, you can knock out an Okiku, for example, who naturally has 5000 power. And you can knock out a bunch of other problematic characters in this meta. So Otama makes a return. The other essential, and it's weird because when you see the ratios, you'll be like, is he essential? But Tony Chopper, he's a blocker. He's a cheap blocker, 1 cost, so can be searched by Curly Dedan. 1000 power, no counter, but we honestly don't need him to counter. We just need him to be on board to prevent an attack. Taking one for the team from that 12k kid swing. Another staple of the OP01 meta returns here with character Zoro. This is the 3 cost to play, 5000 power rush Zoro, as he's affectionately called. And this is just important to add to that sort of aggressive nature of this deck. Next up, I'm going to put Whitebeard as an essential card. So Whitebeard is a new SR from OP02, 9 cost to play, so pretty expensive, 10,000 power, but has a really awesome on play ability that kind of acts as defense for us, right? So on play, up to one of your leader gains plus 2k power until the start of your next turn. Then you can add cards from your life area to your hand by your effects during this turn. And then also when attacking, Dawn times 2, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 3000 power or less. So really it's that first part of the ability that gives our leader plus 2k power. So we can put Edward Newgate aka Whitebeard onto the board for 9 and then give Zoro plus 2k power until the start of our next turn. So as it goes to our opponent's turn and they're trying to figure out, the battle math behind it, they need to reach 7k power naturally in order to even have a chance at, attacking and taking life. So really, this is a great defensive play at 9, just because you get a 10k body onto the board that can, with its ability, KO something that's pretty small, while also protecting your leader, making it a little bit more buff, and so your opponent has to do more to try and overcome it. And then the last essential card I'm going to say is Jet Pistol. Still one of the strongest, event cards, main event cards that we have in the game. Main KO one of your opponent's characters with 6000 power or less for only 4 costs, and a trigger ability that says activate this main effect. That's pretty solid, not gonna lie. Combine that with all of your power removal, beautiful. Alright, finally, let's talk about the flex cards, and there's a couple in here that I wanted to discuss. So the first one is going to be Brook. Really, I was just kind of looking for a 2k counter here in this spot. I was testing Sanji and Usopp, but honestly it didn't quite feel right. I really like this because in this sort of what I'm predicting to be a swarm meta where I want to fill the board sort of as quickly as possible. I like Brook because it's an on play. You get to give some of that Dawn flexibility to another character, give them a plus 2k power bonus, essentially, which for a lot of our sort of one cost characters kind of gets into natural range of 5k natural attacker status. And we put a body on board who can then benefit from, you know, Zoro's ability, get Dawn added to him later on. So that's why I chose Brook. So I like him a lot here. One thing that I was really testing was actually teching in one starter Nami, and honestly I've been doing this for a bunch of the red decks that I've been testing, and I like it a lot. So a great one cost character that just adds a little bit of extra punch to an attacker, something that in terms of the battle math your opponent doesn't necessarily consider at the moment, can kind of catch people off guard. But one cost to play, 1000 power, counter plus 1k, activate main once per turn. Give your leader or one of your characters one rested Dawn card. So this is pretty cool too, because you can play you know, Whitebeard for 9, you know, give Zoro the plus 2k, making him 7, then play the Nami, activate her ability, and then put a Dawn onto Zoro. So now you can have an 8k swing with Zoro, and that Anthem aura ability kind of goes out to the rest of your characters if there were any on your board. The starter Nami card, very good tech. When I do Whitebeard and Garp deck profiles, you'll see her too. Alright, so next up is Gordon, and honestly, I really debated him so much because he didn't have a counter. But honestly, I grew to love Gordon. One cost to play, 2000 power, no counter, unfortunately, but activate main. You can return this card to the bottom of the deck, and then up to one of your opponent's characters loses minus 3k power during this turn. Now that seems like a big sacrifice for just minus 3k, but when you think about what you can do with minus 3k power, like Gordon plus Otama plus Vista equals a very KO'd 8 cost kid for like only 5 Dawn, and that's if you have to play Gordon on that turn. But I did limit him a little bit in my deck just because, you know, I like counters. I like counters a lot. Next up for flex spot is Nico Robin, and I'm placing her as a flex mostly for the redundancy of her effect. Once again, she does KO character with 3000 power or less, but it's a Dawn ×1 when attacking ability, as opposed to Vista, who's simply an on play. So yeah, there's maybe a little bit more repeatability there, but also going to be heavily targeted to get removed. But I liked her in this just because good removal ability and also a little bit more close to an actual 5k attacker. So if we put one Dawn onto her and then use the Zoro ability, she goes up to 6. The math is pretty good there. Uta is another card that I teched in here, mostly because I like to have that sort of recursion of things from trash. So 4 cost to play, 4000 power, on play, return up to one of your red characters other than Uta that cost 3 or less from your trash, and then add it to your hand. So you can get your Vistas this way, which is a great way to sort of recur him if he gets removed. Rush Zoro, obviously a fantastic target for this. But really, probably your Machina, right? 2k counter, and you're able to boost another 1 cost character on the board. Really, really solid targets all across the board in this deck. Alright, last 2 flex cards. I got Rush Luffy as a flex. So we kind of see decline in the number of Rush Luffys we see in decks, just because, to be honest, I don't know. Is it because we can remove a bunch of smaller blockers? Maybe. Maybe it's a little bit easier. But I really like Rush Luffy's ability to just bypass all the blockers. And one of the sort of more meta calls that I'm thinking about in the English release of this is that we're probably going to see more Black Navy decks try and make their way, try and be relevant in the meta. And that's just kind of my take. And so, as we know with Black, there is a lot of defense, a lot of blockers in there. And so if we can just, you know, bypass them, I think is absolutely solid. So I like Monkey D. Luffy probably a little bit more than Japanese meta did. And then finally, I got Red Hawk in here just because I like that counter and I like that potential to remove characters. And mostly I was thinking about like problematic things in the mirror match come to mind, where a lot of like Zoros are going to be playing characters that have 3000 power, 4000 power, something in that range, and unless they're thinking proactively and adding the Dawn onto them before they attack, then they're susceptible to Red Hawk. But those are just a couple of the flex spots. I would love to hear what you think about them, if you would change them out, and what would you change them out for. But now the moment that you've been waiting for, let's go ahead and jump into the actual ratios of the deck list. Alright, so here is the deck list. Starting us off, we have our leader, 1 copy. Obviously, we can only have 1 leader available until some shenanigans happen in the game later on, but who knows if that'll happen. But 1 leader Zoro, we have 4 Otama, 4 Makino, 1 Tony Chopper, and that might come as a surprise, there's only 1 blocker in this whole thing. Yes, there's only 1 blocker in this whole thing. Mostly because I didn't want to clog up my searches with Curly Dan by having a bunch of Tony Choppers. If I happen to see him with Curly Dan, I'm going to probably pull him just because he is the only one. But ultimately, this is an aggro-focused deck, one to focus on getting the pieces that would actually allow me to chip away at their life a little bit more. Plus, to be honest, with the number of removal that is introduced in OP02, these cheap blockers aren't as stable as they used to be. They don't stick onto the board as long as you might hope, right? And so I feel like a lot of decks are really, it depends on the deck too, but if you are able to, you're going to reduce the number of cheap blockers that you have in your deck and then kind of favor more counters. But that's just a loose general observation, nothing that I've really counted, but that's how it feels, at least to me. Next up, we have 1 copy of Starter Nami, 4 copies of OP01 Nami, 2 copies of Gordon, 3 copies of Sunny-kun, 4 copies of Curly Dan, very important to have 4 copies. I got 3 copies of Brook, just because I like the 2-gate counter. I don't necessarily want to see him so much in my hand, so 3 feels like a really good number. 4 copies of Vista, 3 copies of Nico Robin, reduced her a little bit just because we really don't need her with Vista, but still really good to have, a very capable attacker on the board and maybe just set up. 1 copy of Uda, 4 copies of Crush Zoro, 2 copies of Monkey D. Luffy. Thinking about maybe bumping that up to 3, but maybe that's too many supers with, not enough counter potential. Then I got 4 copies of Edward Newgate. Maybe that seems like overkill, but I really do like the ability to add 2k onto my leader, especially against most decks, other than maybe, against Whitebeard decks. Just because it's a little easier for it to get to 7k. And if you can play multiple in succession, that's pretty solid. It's a pain in the butt for your opponent, but it's pretty solid for you. And then going into our events, we have 2 copies of Red Hawk and then 4 copies of Jet Pistol. And that is my OP02 Zoro deck list. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. What do you think about the ratios? Am I right or wrong on Gordon? Is it even necessary? Should we be adding more Rush Luffy into our red decks? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video and found this very helpful, consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel, as we're going to be doing a lot more OP02 content moving forward for the next couple weeks. And I'd really appreciate if you check out this Smoker deck list over here. Really awesome deck that my friend Alex had made, and you can actually see both of this deck and the other deck in action in the Smoker vs. Zoro gameplay video. Anyway, that'll do it for me, so thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it, and captains, remember, build what you like, play what you love, and I'll catch you in the next video.